Dr. Mabin, dear Dr. Srinivas Junuguru,
Yes.
thank you for joining us. I am passing moderation to Dr. Mabin from Fudan University. He is the Deputy Director of the Center for Shanghai Cooperation Organization Studies and our good friend of this conference. And he had great keynote speech yesterday. And he is one of the co-authors of our book, China-Eurasia, you can see here. So please, Dr. Mabin, our technical team is working to unite all speakers, and please.
Okay, thank you very much. And good afternoon, everyone. It's my great honor to have this opportunity to assist all the speakers of panel 5. And this panel is about the regimes which affect Central Asia, like BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, TIRET, etc. I think those topics, these topics will bring us some new dimensions, which might be complementary to the last panel. And as we can say that last panel was very good discussion about the geopolitical things and a lot of topics about the China's role in this background, but not I think none of the speakers from China. But we talk about a lot about China, and very interesting. But this panel we have we have the Chinese scholars, I think, but we are talking about the regimes and India and China. And in this panel, we have 5 speakers. And the first is Dr. Srinivas, and he's from the University of Woxsen University in India. And in the past several years, Dr. Srinivas published at least 2 books about the BRICS, like the role of Russia and China, and the rise of the BRICS and the changing world order. And the thing is, Dr. Srinivas will give us a very interesting discussion about the BRICS. Dr. Srinivas, and please.
Sorry, you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start, and you have
Okay.
10 minutes. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, sir. So, is it visible, sir?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, this is Dr. Srinivas Junuguru, working as Assistant Professor of Political Science in Woxsen University. First of all, thank you so much for Dr. Meher Sakyan for giving me this opportunity. I would be talking about can the BRICS be a force for the revival of China's economy? The framework of my presentation is introduction, methodology, and scope of the study, background, theoretical underpinning, BRICS origin and its strength in global economy, China's economy crisis, BRICS role in China's economy revival, a way forward. This is how I divided my presentation. So in the introduction, we know that like how things are actually shaping in present international relations. We are actually living in a complicated and very sensitive situation due to COVID-19 pandemic and Ukraine crisis. And at the same time, we have been witnessing the rapid depletion of Western hegemony or supremacy in international relations. So at this point of time, we actually, started witnessing, COVID-19, and we have seen like how it got shattered the global economy, irrespective of the country, region, and whatnot, right? And apart from this one, another major blow to the present global system that came in the form of a Ukraine crisis, and this had made world politics went into another level. But then the spillover effects of these two incidents on world clearly disturb the economy ecosystem of the world. And the more impact is on the emerging markets economy, including India, China, and several other countries. And we have been witnessing already. So the heat is already faced by the China due to its economy and the political crisis that is taking place now, that the recent protest that has been taken in China and other major things that are happening in India. We are like witnessing that how these two incidents have hit this emerging market economy in present international relation. So it is in context, the research paper explores the BRICS role in China's economy revival. So the methodology and the scope of the study is basically descriptive. I try to describe based on the available research that I got, and then I try to analyze based on the available research, and there is ample or a lot of literature that is there on the global economic crisis and how the world economy is in trouble. But then there is not enough. I'm not saying that there is no, but then there's not enough literature that how actually the Chinese economy originated and how the things that are shaping in present Chinese society. Is that sort of research is less. Therefore, this research paper is trying to fill this gap. So the background, so the global economy, as we are going through a tumultuous phase now, and the most important reason for this is due to two reasons, particularly COVID-19 crisis and the Ukraine crisis. But in this presentation, I try to focus only upon Ukraine crisis because we had read enough literature on how the COVID-19 hit the global economy and what are the consequences. That's why I try to undermine that thing, and then mostly underscore the importance of Ukraine crisis. So because of these two reasons, the world economy is still suffering. Beyond the suffering and humanitarian crisis from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the entire global economy is feeling the effects of a slow growth and faster inflation that has been said by IMF. And then it is also tried to highlight the 3 points that this consequence of this Ukraine crisis is going through. And one is higher prices for commodities like food and energy will push up inflation further. That actually I'm witnessing in my country, that the inflation is too much high, and that had also been faced by Chinese society and several other countries. So neighboring, and the second point is neighboring economies in particular will grapple with disrupted trade, supply chains, and remittances, as well as an historic surge in refugee flows that we actually seeing this every day. Supply chains and okay. And the third point is reduced business confidence and higher investor uncertainty will weigh on asset prices, tightening financial conditions and potentially spurring global capital outflows from emerging markets. That because the Western countries, which are the largest contributing countries for FDIs in global South countries, as the Western countries are already in turmoil situation due to the Ukraine crisis, obviously they'll try to withdraw their FDI. That is, we're facing it now. So the economic activity will remain deeply depressed through next year, with minimal growth of 0.3% expected in 2023, as energy price shocks continue to impact the region, said by the World Bank, right? So the theoretical perspective, basically, I try to give I try to give importance to two theories. So one is a power transition theory, and the other one is a functionalist approach. Why a power transition theory? Because these countries actually fall under emerging market economies, and according to the power transition theory proposed by Orgonansky, he actually belongs to realist perspective of international relations, and these guys try to divide the world into, like, status quo countries and revisionist countries. Revisionist countries, basically their objective is to revive or remove the existing global structure and try to establish their own perspective of international relations. Basically, they try to revise the entire existing structure, but the BRICS countries or these China, India, or other countries, they're not trying to revive or revise. Rather, they're trying to what to say, reform the country. So basically the point is power transition theory trying to divide the global economies into two categories, status quo countries and the revisionist countries. But then the BRICS countries do not belong to revisionist countries, and they not even fall under status quo countries, because they're trying to reform the existing global structure, right? So the other method that we can put in this argument is that probably these countries are actually trying to reform the existing global order, and also there can be called as pluralist countries, maybe reformist countries, right? So that is how the first argument goes. And the second argument, like a functionalist approach, it basically talks about integration, international integration and collective governance. Basically, if one part of the society experiences this development and integration, the development of fruits of this things can be expanded to other regions, maybe other societies, that the BRICS countries trying to slowly expand, but there are a lot of ifs and buts that actually we are witnessing, because China has its own individual perspective, India has its own way, likewise the Brazil, and then China, right? So so BRICS origin and its strength in global economy. So then the BRIC acronym was first created by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001, and he basically predicted that these BRIC countries consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which actually became part of the BRICS who? Sorry?
So please
sorry.
continue. Please continue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So basically, Jim O'Neill proposed BRIC idea in 2001, and then basically they in BRIC group they basically tried to highlight emerging market economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China. South Africa became part of BRICS or BRIC in 2011 in Sanya Summit, which was held in China, and they actually projected that this group is going to play biggest like a global economic group in emerging international relations, so that the Western countries should shift their foreign policy towards these countries. Okay. So according to the report of BRICS statistical publication of 2020, BRICS countries share in global population is 41.9%, and their contribution to the global territory is 30%, and their contribution to the global economy is 23%, and their and 18% of trade these 5 countries are contributing, and 25% of foreign investment. So the critical aspect of the BRICS group is that due to their domestic solid driven growth model, because these are the countries which are having humongous natural resources and then human resources, right? They need resources. I mean, they need goods. So basically, there is a lot of demand for the goods, and they also have demographic dividend. Like for example, India, which is having human resources, is like 60% of their population, which fall under 15 to 35 or 45, which is actually working population. Hence, it is clearly indicating that this country has humongous amount of demographic dividend. And they also have technological rival economy. But the point I try to highlight this thing here, of course, it is actually the industrial economy, but technology also playing a significant role since recent past. For example, just like the Middle East countries, they main.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, Doctor, and you have still 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, yes, I'll try to conclude it. Yes, okay, technology also playing a major role for these countries' exports in global economy, particularly since recent past, right? And all these countries have the same ambition to play a significant role in international relations, and they also have a common approach to reform existing international order by reforming global governance system. Okay, so China's economic crisis that actually we are witnessing. Okay, so while many countries are like under deep economic crisis because of the COVID-19 and then the Ukraine crisis. So in China's its government policy have also playing a significant role for their economies to go down. And due to COVID-19 and its Ukraine crisis impacting the growth of China economy. And China economy is slowing down as it adopts to punishing zero COVID strategy and weakening global demand. Demand in counties like the US has declined too because of higher interest rates, inflation, and the war in Ukraine. Beijing's goal and annual growth rate of 5.5% is now out of reach, although officials have downplayed the need to meet the target, but this was not the case in like some 10-15 years back. The recent protest against the Xi Jinping on his strategy of dealing with rising corona cases, COVID outbreaks in several cities like manufacturing hubs like Shenzhen and Tianjin have been hurting economic activity across industries. And Beijing in August 2022 announced a 1 trillion yuan plan to boost small business, infrastructure, and real estate. But officials can do a lot more to trigger spending to meet growth targets and create jobs, as the protest signals large-scale unrest over the policies adopted by the government. So weak real estate activity and negative sentiment in the housing sector.
Excuse me. Excuse me,
yeah.
Doctor. So could you just jump to the conclusion?
Yeah. So basically, because of the point I'm trying to highlight is that Chinese economy general crisis due to COVID-19 and then Ukraine crisis and the stern policy of Xi Jinping, okay, and other internal policies which has been also predicted by the global organization like IMF and World Bank. So then how the BRICS countries can play a major role for the revival of Chinese economy? Probably since the BRICS countries have humongous amount of natural resources and human resources that can be tapped by the Chinese economy policy makers. But then it again depends on the how China actually strategize their policies towards these BRICS countries. If they try to bully BRICS economy, that these BRICS countries may not accept it, right? And also probably they can depend on NDB, which was established by the BRICS countries, because they started funding a lot for the infrastructure development of these countries. Probably they can do that, and they can probably liberalize the economy, particularly liberalize, and they can also liberalize their stern policy on imposing lockdowns that they are imposing. And then for China, the BRICS is a biggest geopolitical entity to counter Western supremacy in global political environment. That was the objective. But then they should actually change their policy. So a way forward is basically BRICS itself is in economic crisis due to their internal and external factor that actually, due to again COVID-19 Ukraine crisis. As mentioned earlier, the BRICS has a lot resources, but the China has to be benevolent towards its fellow brethren in the BRICS group, and then China should stop forceful imposition of its own strategy on the BRICS countries. For example, it's trying to expand the BRICS group, which actually are objecting by other members of the BRICS group. And China and the US competition may affect the cooperation of the BRICS because China, India has a good relation with US. Likewise, other countries also sometimes they are also trying to build good relation with America. So that should be handled better way and proper way, so that then only the BRICS could extend their like harmless cooperation with China so that the China will be developed rapidly. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry if I've exceeded the time.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to interrupt you several times. And our next speaker is Dr. Erkan Aydin, and he will talk about the SCO's contribution to the counterterrorism in Central Asia. And I think this is a very interesting topic, and especially in the time of US withdrawal from Afghanistan. So Dr. Merve, please, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Merve. This is a part of my PhD dissertation. I will defend my proposal defense end of this month. So your contribution and comments will be very nice for me. And greetings from Shanghai. Let me share my screen. Yes. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, let me start. Today, I'm going to talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's contribution to counterterrorism in Central Asia. This is my, it's not working. What? Okay, this is my content. It contains 4 sections. First, the structures and effects of terrorist activities in Central Asia. Secondly, the SCO's perception of terrorism and counterterrorism in the light of official documents. And thirdly, the SCO's practices for counterterrorism activities in Central Asia. And 4, the strengths and weaknesses of SCO's counterterrorism efforts. As you know, terrorism is one of the most detrimental security threats to the SCO geography. For example, according to the Global Terrorism Database, 2,660 terrorist attacks were reported in this geography between 1996 and 2016. Especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, terrorist groups gained a significant influence in the region. Today, there are many terrorist organizations that are directly or indirectly influential in Central Asia. For instance, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, Islamic Jihad Union, Hizb ut-Tahrir, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS are some of these terrorist organizations. In this respect, the first 3 of them are directly, others 3 indirectly effective in the region. In here, we can see terrorist attacks in some Central Asian countries, which ended with deaths between 2008 and 2018. In general, terrorist organizations that are effective in Central Asia stand out with 4 common features. Firstly, their main motivation sources is religious fundamentalism. We are talking about Islam as religion in here. So it's an interpretation of Islam. Secondly, these terrorist organizations interact with each other and with other regional or global jihadist groups. In other words, they provide financial, weapons, training, and logistic support to each other. 3, most of these groups are not only national, but also regional or global security threats. And 4, due to these terrorist organizations, a large number of people from Central Asian countries participate in conflicts abroad, such as Syria and Iraq. In here, we can see some estimates of Central Asian participation in conflicts abroad. When we look at the SCO's perception of terrorism and counterterrorism, when founding documents are examined, it can be seen that the fight against terrorism is one of the main aims of the SCO. In later agreements and conventions, SCO members agreed on issues such as combating terrorism together, not allowing the use of their lands by terrorists, preventing drug smuggling, and eliminating organized groups. The emphasis on world community in the struggle against terrorism in a document published after 2003 Moscow summit it shows the intention of this organization for international cooperation in the fight against terrorism. It would be incomplete to try to understand SCO's perception of counterterrorism only from the concept of terrorism, because terrorism is generally considered together with extremism and separatism in most documents since SCO's establishment. These three concepts are called three evils and are discussed together in many publications and speeches. Therefore, the SCO's perception of counterterrorism is relatively broader than the Western-centered perception. In this respect, we can look at the contents of some official documents to understand SCO's counterterrorism approach better. For example, we can see the name of these documents at the left and some important concepts of them for effective counterterrorism, of course, on the right, such as collective responsibility, transnational cooperation, coordination with UN, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is important, non-interference of internal affairs, which was also important, coordination of security forces, sharing of information, experience, and legal documents, and using and controlling mass media for effective counterterrorism. When we look at the SCO's counterterrorism practices in Central Asia, we can first say that the SCO has an approach based on proactive measures to prevent terrorist activities before they happen. So it's possible to examine the SCO's efforts to fight against terrorism in two branches. Firstly, the legal base, which includes agreements and conventions. Secondly, the implementation phase, which contains military drills and regional anti-terrorist structure. As legal base, agreements and conventions include issues such as cooperation on counterterrorism, sharing of intelligence, coordination of security forces, extradition, prevention in financing of terrorism, and training of security forces, of course. In this context, the legal base provides a suitable background for the implementation phase. When we look at the implementation phase, in the implementation phase, on the other hand, it's military drills and regional anti-terrorist structure mentioned. Military drills are the SCO's one of the most concrete steps in the fight against terrorism. They have been organized in cooperation with member states since 2002. These drills are carried out under the names of anti-terror, peace mission, Kenshan, and coalition, and they strengthen the SCO's counterterrorism capacity. When we look at the regional anti-terrorist structure, is one of the SCO's two permanent bodies along with the Secretariat. It was established in 2003 and its headquarters located in Tashkent. The purpose of this body is to prevent terrorism through the exchange information and the coordination of such services as border police, customs, and national security services. Regional anti-terror structure is the result of the member states' attempts to establish an anti-terrorist institution dating back to the pre-SCO. For this reason, regional anti-terror structure is responsible for the coordination of decisions taken on the legal base and the implementation phase since its establishment. When we look at the strengths and weaknesses of SCO's counterterrorism, it's possible to summarize the strengths of the SCO in the fight against terrorism as on the left. SCO was among the first regional organizations to address the issue of cross-border terrorism. And SCO includes politically and economically strong countries like China and Russia. And then they include India as an example. SCO also includes experienced countries in combating terrorism. Most of them, actually all of them, are experienced in combating terrorism. And SCO provides a common ground and a long-term cooperation for counterterrorism. And of course, it's one of its two main bodies is related to counterterrorism. When we look at the literature, we can see that there is some weaknesses, and also it's possible to summarize the weaknesses as on the right side. It can be a lack of coercive decision-making mechanism makes it difficult to implement decisions and conventions about counterterrorism, which is the main weaknesses in this area. Also, the differences in expectations between member states may negatively affect SCO's capacity to fight against terrorism. They're really politically and economically strong countries, and if their expectations differ, it may be a negatively affect on this issue. Also, we can say that the bilateral problems between members hinder the organization's counterterrorism vision. For example, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has some issues, and also the new members, India and Pakistan, have some issues. So it may be hinder the organization's counterterrorism vision. And also, we can say that considering terrorism together with separatism and extremism leads to criticisms in the literature that the fight against terrorism may be a little politicized. Thank you for your attention and listening. This was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aydin. And it's a very interesting topic about the anti-terrorism activities in Central Asia. And as we know, ACO is anti-terrorism is one of the three pillars of ACO. And thank you very much for your presentation. Our next speaker is Sudhir Kumar Singh from University of Delhi. His topic is about Central Asia, emerging Indian and Chinese interests. As we know, there's a lot of discussion about the other great powers like US, EU, Russia, and China, but few touch about the India and China. And I think Professor Singh will give us a new thinking about this. Please. Professor Singh? So he's not in the list. So maybe we can just move to the next one. And next speaker will be Dr. Tamas, and he is from the Eötvös Loránd University, based in Hungary, and his topic will be the Dragonfire, China natural gas relations in Central Asia, and he's the expert of political science and also touch about the energy issues. So we welcome Dr. Tamas.
Go to the microphone. Okay, now you can hear me, I guess.
Yeah,
it's the same, actually. It's the same. So either one is working. Okay, thank you. So thank you for the invitation, and my presentation is coming to the screen. Yeah, some seconds. Yeah, here we go. So thank you for the invitation and thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the conference. I will talk a little bit about the Chinese natural gas policy. So the title of my presentation is Dragonfire, Chinese natural gas relations in Central Asia. Let me show you the structure of my presentation. So I want to focus only on natural gas. So oil is not involved here and other aspects of energy policy. And concerning the topical focus of my presentation, I will only focus on China and Central Asia. By Central Asia, I mean the 5 Eastern countries. And the general question that guided this research was that how the energy structure of Asia is transforming. That's the general one, but I try to limit this to natural gas policy because that's enough topic for this presentation. And my basic assumption is that there is a geopolitical rivalry for energy resources between different powers, and especially in Central Asia, which is kind of an emerging region in terms of energy resources, especially natural gas. I will do a kind of geopolitical analysis, so I will show you the distribution of resources, the production, consumption of natural gas, different investments by mainly focusing on China, obviously, and loans and the economic power of those who are related, so China and Central Asian countries. So the aim of my presentation and my paper as well is to assess Chinese influence in Central Asia through the analysis of its natural gas policy. Just quickly, I want to show you the domestic energy policy of China. What can we know about this? The energy consumption in general in China is increasing at a decreasing rate. So they're over the top increase, I would say, and we could see some dampened demand due to the pandemic. It was also true for natural gas consumption as well. But after lockdowns, you know, there is this strong rebound in China. So there are ebbs and flows in the consumption of natural gas and other energy resources in China. And the Chinese energy is dominated by coal. That's a local source. Other sources are mainly from other countries, so they are imported. Actually, 60% of the energy resources are imported in China. And concerning natural gas is 8.11% of the total energy consumption. So it's not so significant, but still, China became the largest natural gas importer since 2019. So we can imagine how big the Chinese energy industry is, that we have like the largest natural gas import in China. But it is only like 4% of the total energy mix, and 8.1% is because there is local production in China in terms of natural gas as well. Yeah, there is one more data, 132.5 BCM imported gas in 2019. That was 64%. 64% of this was LNG. Just to put this data in perspective, Armenian consumption of natural gas, as far as I could see it, is 2.5 BCM natural gas annually, and Great Britain is like 72.5. So Chinese import is like the double of the whole consumption of Great Britain in 1 year. And that's just to the import. Almost the same amount is produced inside China. So it's a huge industry, not just the energy industry, but the natural gas industry as well. We can see in the figures that China is heavily reliant on energy, on LNG, and part of the mix is, as I just mentioned, is from imported natural gas, and that can be divided also to LNG and pipeline gas, and huge domestic production as well in China in terms of natural gas. Okay, I want to show you and focus on this map a little bit more because this is the most important part of my presentation. So there are three main pipelines coming from Central Asia to China. These are natural gas pipelines. Okay, so oil is not involved here, and they are in operation since 2009. At least the first line, that was the A section, section A, and then section B from 2012, and section C 2014. And there are plans about, and they started to construct actually the section D with a huge capacity, using a different route through Central Asian countries. As you can see, the red lines are the section A, B, C of Central Asia China pipelines, and the green one is the section D that's under construction, but now it's not yet determined when it will be online. So these are the basics of the China Central Asia natural gas relations. But if we focus more on the individual countries, I would mention Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. The other two, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, is not relevant at all in terms of natural gas towards China. And their domestic consumption of natural gas is also kind of irrelevant for us here. So Turkmenistan is the greatest player in this game. This country has like huge gas reserves, like 9.3% of the total world reserves of natural gas. The production of Turkmenistan, it's huge, and it makes it the fourth largest natural gas producer in the world, after like the US, Russia, China as well, and Iran. These countries are at the top of the natural gas production, and there is, as I mentioned, there is pipeline connections between Turkmenistan and China since 2009. Through these pipelines, in the beginning it was just one pipeline, but there were these parallel pipelines, the ABC lines. And Chinese investors became also interested in Turkmenistani natural gas resources. They invested heavily, and actually they became the first foreign investors in Turkmen gas production. There are like huge natural gas fields in Turkmenistan, and obviously the Chinese, because of the importance of this pipeline, are very much interested in being on the site and developing these fields together with Turkmen producers. In 2017, there were like 38.7 billion cubic meter export to China. That's 70% of the total Turkmenistani export. So Turkmenistan is heavily reliant on China in terms of natural gas. Other export routes are some neighboring countries, some swap deals with Iran, and but Turkmenistan tries to, find other directions to export actually its huge natural gas production. Okay, I will now turn to Uzbekistan. I would just say shortly that Uzbekistan is, it's has the largest population in Central Asia and has some significant amount of natural gas production. But the country really consumes almost all of the natural gas production. That's why Uzbekistan could only export China around 6 BCM, which is compared to the Turkmenistani share of the natural gas export to China is somewhat less. And Kazakhstan started to export to China in 2017, 5 BCM natural gas. Kazakhstan is better in oil production, actually. And it lasted a little bit long for them to connect, the Western.
Excuse me, Tamas, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, it was a little bit difficult infrastructurally to connect the western part of Kazakhstan to the eastern part of the country, where these lines towards China are going, so that they could export natural gas there. And in general, I would mention that. Not just in terms of natural gas, but in general, China provides a diversification opportunity for Central Asian countries, because they were, before the Chinese involvement in Central Asia, they were reliant on Russian energy infrastructure, in oil as well, and natural gas as well. It is especially true for Turkmenistan. And China can give these countries money for infrastructure and technology, also again for infrastructure, because, for example, Turkmenistan lacks the technological capacity to invest and produce that much amount of natural gas that they are producing now, but they are doing it with Chinese help. There are also some risks, corruption of the local governments, and they also risk some dependency on China, as I mentioned in the case of Turkmenistan. But in the case of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, it's not really the case. They can be open to other directions as well. Uzbekistan is not really an export-oriented natural gas producer, but Kazakhstan can be and is actually exporting significant amount of natural gas to Russia, not just only to China. And as a conclusion, I would say that we can see that natural gas constitutes only 8.1% of the energy mix of China, but still it significantly transforms the energy structure, at least the natural gas infrastructure of Central Asia, because of the Chinese involvement there. And the lack of Russian involvement anymore. I mean, there are some, still existing relations of Central Asian countries and Russian countries in terms of natural gas, as I mentioned, but the growing importance of China is like the trend here. That's the tendency. So China really has huge energy demand, and it's coming from the domestic growth and the decarbonization of the country, and that's the reason, that's the thing that motivates China to look for energy resources in the neighboring countries, and Central Asia is just a good hit, I would say. So in terms of the position of Central Asia, as kind of a general conclusion, I would say that there is a transitional situation there. Chinese economic dominance in energy policy as well, not just in oil, but in natural gas as well. But there is Russian dominance still Russian dominance in the military sphere. Social and cultural issues are dominated by Russia. But as I mentioned, tendencies are favorable for China in the midterm. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And it's a very good topic about the China and Central Asia's gas relations, especially for the transforms of the Central Asia energy structure. It's very good topic, very interesting. And our next speaker is Dr. Sudhir Kumar Singh, and he come with us now. Professor Singh, please, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Professor Ma, for your kind words. Thank you, the organizers, for calling me for this prestigious international seminar on Eurasian affairs. My topic is Central Asia emerging Indian and Chinese interest, and few papers have already done within this session. My previous speaker was speaking about Russian role. I agree with him, but disagree also little bit that in the backdrop of Ukraine war, Russian imprint is reducing in many spheres of Eurasia, and particularly in Central Asia. Central Asia remains the heart of Eurasia, which bifurcate Asia to European mainland, and Mackinder theory applies here. So Central Asia is strategically very, very important for China, India, America, Russia, and other global players. In 2021, bilateral trade of China with Central Asian republics was around 51 billion, and they are slated to touch 70 billion by 2030. The Chinese Western Turbulence province of Xinjiang has common border with three Central Asian republics: Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. President Xi Jinping hold a summit with the Central Asian leaders on 25th January 2022. and also to commemorate 30th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship between China and Central Asia. China is very, very important in the region because of many exclusive regions. But one of the most important is that China share borders with 3 Central Asian republics and settle their border problem with all 3 on the basis of give and take. But mostly 15% Chinese demand were met in maximum with all 3 republics. What are the, now I will come on the Indian interest and Central Asian convergences with India. My first point will be the Afghan scenario. Afghan, as you know, that Kabul is being captured by Taliban in August 2021, and if you recall previous Taliban regime in Afghanistan, it had a spillover in Central Asia. Islamic movement of Uzbekistan had leased a terror regime in Central Asia, and they had link with Taliban. Still, they are alive, and they have an alliance with IS, and that could be very, very detrimental to Central Asian republics also. India's interest also remains that Central Asia should be peaceful, developing. So Afghan situation matters for Indian defense and security interest also as Central Asia. So this is the kind of convergence. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao visited Central Asian republics back in 1993, but not a single prime minister visited all 5 republics of Central Asia, which was done by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in July 2015. In a 1 week, he visited all 5 republics of Central Asia. India hold first summit with Central Asian republics in January 2022, and it is supposed to do the same thing in 2024. Prime Minister Modi has visited many parts of Central Asia in between, including Samarkand in September 2022. And there are multilateral multilateral agreements have been inked during this process. I will suggest that India is very much behind the Chinese proactiveness on economic affairs, particularly the FDIs. Chinese FDIs are biggest in China, in Central Asia. So India has to take care of that and has to propose a kind of alternative way. So today China has become a major player in international financial system. I'm talking about the debt trap, which we have witnessed just few months before what was happening in Sri Lanka. So same thing could be repeated in some of the Central Asian republics, because Chinese FDI and interest with high rate is a matter of great concern in Central Asian republics. Few countries I will cite that Kyrgyzstan ranks 5th with 30% of its GDP they have taken from China, Tajikistan 19%, and Uzbekistan 16%. So this is the situation. And post-COVID scenario has further complicated situation for China in Central Asia, and a little bit trust deficit has increased. So that is a serious problem. What India should do, pinpointed that India is not directly connected geographically with Central Asia. Before partition, India was connected with Central Asia, but today India is not geographically connected with Central Asia. So India, whatever is doing at Chahwar, Iran, developed a port. So India has already built Jarnej Road through Afghanistan and connected with Turkmenistan, and that could be reaching all corners of Central Asia. India must expedite this connectivity route. And second is air connectivity. Air connectivity is very, very important. My home town of Eastern India is far away, but Tashkent and other towns of Central Asia is nearer to New Delhi, but we have hardly 2 or 3 flights in a week. It should be 5 flights in a week. So more and more people-to-people connect must prevail. 23,000 Chinese students are doing their studies in Chinese. Central Asian students are doing their studies in Chinese universities, and lesser than 10,000 are in India. So we have to provide more and more space to Central Asian students for that. Terrorism is our common concern, so we must cooperate on terrorist front. Peace and stability in Afghanistan is win-win situation for Central Asian Republic and China. And I will conclude that India has huge potentialities to play a better, great game in Central Asia. China is far ahead, but India can compete with China at certain extent, and India should not limit its pledges into the papers, but must implement it into action. I believe that by 2035, India will be in a better position in Central Asia. We need a coherent Central Asia policy, which was announced by Government of India in 2012, and all successive governments have pursued that particular policy right from that day till today. So we need to sustain this policy, upgrade it to cope up with the emerging situation, but we must expedite our connectivity, both land route and air connectivity, and must cooperate on major issues, key issues like agriculture, like animal husbandry, like other kind of small scale industries. And we have a strong soft power connectivity with Central Asia also. So we must enhance that particular olive branches also. I believe that through that, India will be enhancing its presence in Central Asia. The coming decades and years are very positive for this purpose. But in coming years, India and Central Asia interest will be very, sometime diverging, sometime converging in Central Asia, but interest from both parties will be watched by the analysts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Singh. Thank you very much for your sharing about the Indian policy and the new situation in this in Central Asia. And our next speaker is Dr. Zhengji. He's from Nanjing University, also from China, and his topic is about the diplomatic activities of the TIRET regime and its quick Demise. And okay, Dr. Ju, you have 10 minutes, please. Dr. Ju, are you here?
Please unmute, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah,
okay.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Ma, for your introduction. I would like to express my deepest thanks to Armenia China-Eurasia Council for Political and Strategic Research for organizing this pre-named event, and for accepting my paper, The Diplomatic Activities of the TIRET Regime and its Quick Demise. As we all know, China's Xinjiang is a strategic pivot straddling the Asian Silk Road linking the East Asia and the Central Asia. In China's Republican era, in Xinjiang, there emerged two secessionist regimes. The first regime was named the Turkish Islamic Republic of East Turkestan, in short, TIRET. TIRET was established in 1933 in Kashgar. After a few months, the new secessionist regime was, with tens of thousands of troops, were utterly destroyed by the much smaller troops of Ma Zhongying, who had just been defeated near Urumqi by the Soviet Union and then fled to the South Xinjiang. Why TIRET could be so quickly annihilated? My paper will disclose the fatal key of its quick demise. TIRET was established in 1933, namely 1 year after the Manchukuo, a puppet regime established in northeast China by the Japanese invaders. During this time, while being busy with launching the campaigns against the Communist Soviet Republic in South China, and the central government in Nanjing had also successfully cracked down the uprising of the 9th Army in Southeast Asia, as very few military forces were left by the central government to deal with the matters in Xinjiang. 4 domestic powers were competing each other in this northwest province. The first power was the provincial army led by Sheng Shicai. The second was a Kumo rebel army led by Kojalia Zhaji. The third was the Islamic government in Hotan led by the Muhammad Amin Bugra, which showed the strongest secessionist tendency. And finally, the fourth was Mahzhong's Chinese Muslim army from Xinjiang's Eastern Labor Gansu province. Since Xinjiang shared a known borderline with the Soviet Union and the British Indian, each of the 4 domestic forces had its international support. Although after controlling the old city of Kashgar, the secessionists proclaimed the founding of TIRET in 1933 with the participation of tens of thousands of troops and civilians. However, when they endeavored to attack the new city of Kashgar, they suffered heavy casualties, even though their rivals only had much smaller troops, according to a memoir written by a TIRET official. The main reason was that TIRET's rivals were better armed. How could TIRET solve their problem of poor military equipment? Xinjiang has no littoral, and its northern part was controlled by the provincial army under the support of the Soviet Union, since the latter had several member republics near Xinjiang, and whose population were also Turkic-speaking Muslims. Moscow was worried that if Xinjiang became independent, the Soviet Central Asia might break away from Moscow in a similar way. Undoubtedly, Moscow did not want to see any weapons or ammunition via Soviet Central Asia or Soviet-controlled North Xinjiang falling into the hands of TIRET. Besides, it was hardly impossible for TIRET to transport arms via Inner Asia, where Han Chinese lived. Therefore, for them, there was only one feasible way of transporting arms, which was shipping arms by sea to British India, then from India to the neighboring Afghanistan, and then finally from Afghanistan to the neighboring Kashgar Xinjiang. The disadvantage of adopting this route is that it would involve quite a few other countries, and thus depended on their attitudes. Although the Afghan king and Afghan prime minister both had met Kashgar representatives in Kabul, neither of them acknowledged the TIRET's independence, and Afghanistan had not enough arms for itself. The British Consul General in Kashgar, Thomson Glover, attended the founding ceremony of TIRET. Nevertheless, due to their friendly relationship with China, the British Indian and London both opposed to interfering in China's domestic affairs. It seemed that it was too difficult for the Kashgar representatives to get arms support from abroad. Just at this time, a critical intermediary appeared. His name is Stürmer, a German engineer who rushed to Kashgar from Afghanistan. In November 1933, when TIRET was just established, Stürmer chose to cross Pamir from Kabul to Kashgar after his failure in negotiation with Afghan government were dropped. In Kashgar, Stürmer was appointed to be the chief engineer. In Kabul, Stürmer got to know a German citizen named Ebler, who was a representative of German company. Ebler was doing the legal arms business with the Afghan government. After Stürmer arrived in Kashgar, he wrote a letter to Ebler. The letter was first brought to India by Dr. Ali, the Kashgar representative in Delhi. Then it was mailed to Ebler in Kabul. In this letter, Stürmer, who wanted Ebler's help, told Ebler that Ali had accepted the assignment and funding for procuring arms. The Kashgar representative in Kabul visited Ebler and gave him two informations. First, Ali wanted to buy arms and transport them through Afghanistan. Second, the Afghan permission might be granted. Then the British minister in Kabul allowed Ebler to come to his negation and hinted to him that the British Indian government would certainly allow Kashgar to transport arms via India and Afghanistan. It seemed that only if Abler and the Kashgar representatives reached an agreement, everything would go smoothly and the transport channel for arms would be built under the support of Britain and Afghanistan. However, the secessionists had never expected that their entrusted German engineer, Dr. Stürmer, was in fact an international spy with dual identities. The German minister in Kabul, Timke, was informed by his English counterpart that Stürmer's girlfriend, who claimed to be Stürmer's wife and whose nationality was unclear, had arrived in Kashgar via Persia and Russia. After Timke asked more about Stürmer, Timke recalled a similar person he got to know in Turkey during the war. After further analysis, Timke believed that the TIRET general engineer Stürmer was at the same time serving the Soviet government. For confirmation, Timke requested the German Foreign Office in Berlin to help him investigate Stürmer's real identity. Soon, he received the reply from Berlin that Stürmer was engaged in anti-German propaganda during the war, later worked in Soviet service, and probably have spent a few years in Ethiopia as a paid political agent. Moreover, Stürmer had given up his German citizenship in 1930. So far, Timke basically confirmed that the information about the transnational arms trade had already been leaked to the Soviet Union. However, after weighing the pros and cons, Timke decided to keep silent and continue to observe.
Dr. G, you have 1 minute. 1 minute,
okay.
Please.
Okay. Meanwhile, Timke decided to keep silent and continue to observe. The German Foreign Office did not disagree with his silent plan. Meanwhile, still dreaming of the success of the arms trade, the Kashgar representative in Kabul were kept in dark about this intelligence. After being informed, the Soviet Union took several actions, which made the arms trade very, very difficult. And without the foreign arms support, the secessionists in Kashgar soon failed. On 6 February 1934, a branch of Ma Zhongyi's troops, no more than 2,000 soldiers, moved forward into the old city of Kashgar. Then the TIRET collapsed. The story of TIRET failure can also be understood through the lens of another example, which is the Kingdom of Yeti Shah in Xinjiang, which was established in the 1860s by Mohammad Yaqub Bek, who obtained strong international support from British Empire, Russian Empire, and Ottoman Empire. Their most important armed support came from British and India and Russia, whereby Yaqub consolidated his regimes and expanded his kingdom.
Excuse me, Dr. G, could you just jump to the conclusion?
Okay. According to the international law, the territorial integrity of China should be respected by all countries in the world. Therefore, my research conclusion in the quick demise of TIRET illustrates the importance of international cooperation in safeguarding territorial integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. G, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. And thank you all. And thanks all the speakers of this panel. I think we have at least we discussed at least 4 pairs of things, 2 kinds of issues, traditional and non-traditional, 2 types of actors, emerging actor and old player in Central Asia, and 2 parts of the whole process, the policy and effects, and 2 sorts of perspectives, contemporary and historical perspective. And all of those discussions are very interesting and inspiring. And I hope we have more time, but the time is out. And now we will collect 1 question. And if the audience or the other speakers have the question, please raise your hand or just speak to our speakers.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to the whole panel. I had a question for Tamas, actually. if you look at the geopolitics surrounding natural gas, that is especially for us in Europe a very hot topic at this moment. But as you described, the increase of consumption by the People's Republic of China is growing at a slower pace, and there's a lot of economies willing to supply the natural gas. If you look at the medium to long term, do you think this means that those geopolitical tensions around natural gas will decrease?
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, so yeah, the reason why I describe the situation in China is like decreasing and sometimes increasing is because of the pandemic, as I mentioned in the presentation, and also there are capacity issues in China that they couldn't really manage to solve. That's another reason, because there is just a strong political commitment to decarbonize the economy, but they cannot do it as fast as they imagine to do so. And that's why there were some disruptions in the pipeline, in the natural gas, not just in the production, but in the supply as well, in general. So there were like sometimes winters when there were not enough natural gas for the whole consumption. But concerning the geopolitical rivalries, I don't think that there, because of the kind of risk that China has, like sometimes decreasing and increasing consumption. In the midterm, it will be slow by slow increase. And that's why China will be constrained to move towards more and more energy import, and Central Asia and Russia will be that game. So therefore, China needs to reach out to these territories even more than today. So I would say that the geopolitical rivalry would even increase in these regions. And the main question is whether the LNG industry would be so overloaded by Chinese demand. That would also mean more rivalry in the whole natural gas industry in the world, because LNG is connected to the world market. But Central Asia and Russia, they are just local markets, but still important for the great power competition. So yeah, that's my kind of answer.
Okay, thank you very much. And we ask, does there any more questions?
Yes, thank you very much. My next question also for Dr. Dudlak. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation, and I think it will stand also a chapter for our forthcoming book. And you have spoken about this gas pipeline, and there were some kind of plan to extend it and build the link as well. What is happening now, and what is the problems? What is the challenges that Central Asian states and China could not or cannot do it now? Do you have any information? Of course, I understand that it is some kind of.
Yeah, it's a very new phenomenon that I have just some information on this issue. There is one problem with the Chinese consumption. I mentioned about that. So China is not that much nowadays, not that much interested in increasing the natural gas exports, because the local consumption is not enough to do so. But in the midterm, they would need that gas. They would need that gas from Russia, from even more from Central Asia. The other part of the problem is, I guess there were they couldn't agree on some terms. That's my kind of information from the literature, from different articles. that China and Tajikistan and Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan couldn't agree with each other concerning the route of the pipeline in that section, and concerning, you know, management issues. So that's why is now on hold. The project is on hold over there. And, you know, Chinese are just not prompting enough this whole situation to be solved, because now they are just fine with the existing capacities. So as far as I can see it, these are the available information that we can have on this pipeline D, but according to estimations, this D line will be online within 3 or more, a little bit more years.
Thank you very much. I will do my last comment, and I will pass to Professor Gärtner, also have some kind of comments. And here we have heard about debt trap and about Hambantota port, but actually the history of Hambantota port was started not by China, but from the side of Canada. So there is a very good research which was implemented by the US Johns Hopkins University. Who is interested, I can send you. And also there were a talk in Asia Global Institute with the representative of the US Johns Hopkins University. I am mentioning the US. So I can send you this talk as well. You can look. And about the Belt and Road Initiative, actually, world needs some kind of investments, which the West is not doing. And China has spent 200 billion, and it is going to spend 800 billion. And of course, we like our Western partners and our scholars like to speak about debt traps, some risk. And what about the risks of China? We will speak about the risks of China, because China is providing these funds. And if states are just because of corruption or our internal problem, they are just spending this money without building infrastructure, without nothing. So we will return China's money. So it is, we need to remember, and every government must remember, that Belt and Road Initiative, it is not about aid. It is not aid fund. It is business. It is about business. So any country who wants to work or make money, they need to have a business plan. If they are just taking this money and spending for their own or for their corrupted governmental bodies, so who will give an answer? It is not just the aid. It will be normal if China asks back its debt, and it is doing the US, it is doing the European Union, but no one is speaking about it. So let's remember about it as well. And of course, BBC or CNN is promoting this Hambantota moment, Sri Lanka's moment. But let's go and see what scholar says, what scholar told, what kind of research scholars have. I was mentioning US John Hopkins, but we understand that it is not only me saying or Chinese or our friends here are saying. The Johns Hopkins University did this research. So debt trap or whatever you want, Hambantota's history started from Canada. Thank you. It was my comment. And if you want, do you have any reaction, you can. If not, Dr. Mabin, we can pass also to the Professor Heinz Gärtner. Thank you.
Dr. Behar, I have a small comment at this juncture, if you allow. Dr. Meher?
The floor is yours. Sure.
Yeah.
We are here for this.
Very good argument. Whatever you are saying, nobody can dispute. But my simple argument is that, of course, once a lender comes, it will give you loan on their own terms. But what about the capability of the particular country? There are countries whose total GDP, like Nepal, whole total annual GDP is 100 billion. If the debt is more than 100 billion, then what will be done? Pakistan, $300 billion and $140 billion is total debt. So how they will pay the debt? So this is not a question of Pakistan, Nepal or Hambantota or Sri Lanka. It is also the saga of Africa also. Central Asia also. So we have to, there is a very simple formula by International Financial Agency that once they are lending to any country, they are lending below 1%. But Chinese lending is above 3%. So there is a huge gap of 2%. So smaller countries who have little bit capability in their economy, they can't sustain this pressure. So you have to make a holistic policy to deal with the problems with the smaller countries. And if you will not look into their particular problems, concerns, then it is very turbulent, and it is going to be very turbulent. That is my small submission.
Yes, I apologize that I'm now a little bit playing the professor here. I'm also supervising a doctoral thesis on the BRICS countries, and we tested several theories with my candidate, and it of course turned out that functionalism is not a very good theory to explain BRICS countries, because you have this process of spillover starting from a very low level, science and technology spill over to some sort of economy, spill over to common security policy, common security and common defense and government. So that's not going to happen in the BRICS countries. You stay on the very, very and the lowest level of cooperation according to this functional series. It doesn't even really entirely work for the European Union, because there are already levels where European integration process stops as well. So what we found out, of course, I'm not supervising a PhD here, but what we found out is that the pluralistic security communities by Karl Deutsch work much better. They're much more modest. So that's the idea is to improve communication lines among the member states, to increase some shared values in order to prevent conflict among the member states. So on this level, Karl Deutsch pluralistic security communities fits much better. But I have to add also for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the pluralistic security community work, because in the BRICS as well, in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have very heterogeneous members. So communication is the best on several issues like terrorism, like what we heard, is appropriate, and environment. So that here you can improve communication and common values. But for functionalism, you have to have some common value basis like the European Union, and even then, it is pretty difficult. So it would be worth to look at the different theories. Of course, power transition is one aspect you can look at as well. So.
Thank you, dear Dr. Mabin. You can finalize your panel. We can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry for that. Thank you all the comments and questions and answers, and thank you all the audiences and the speakers of this panel. And we in this panel, we are not only about we were not only shared about the some chapters. I think at least 2 chapters of the coming book, and also one dissertation of 1 PhD, and also a very interesting academic paper proposed by the Srinivas. And I think this kind of discussion will give us more information and more dimensions to understand not only the contemporary Central Asia, but also the very hot topic on the nowadays international relations, like the death trap, something like that. I think is very, very helpful for our understanding the issues or the topics in nowadays. And I hope to thank all the audiences and all the partners in this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we are moving to the next panel, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Muhayyan.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.